Tonight on Greater Boston, former New Hampshire Republican Party Chair Jennifer Horn, a never-Trumper and former Republican Massachusetts Treasurer Joe Malone, once a big-time Trumper, join me on the announcement from the man who urged an overthrow of the U.S. government, election denier-in-chief Donald Trump, plus the inimitable Christopher Muther. He joins me with his latest travel experiences, including being on what he likened to a prison cell on Amtrak's Silver Meteor, plus a stern warning about the impending demise of vacations as a whole, courtesy of social media. It's official. The long-expected announcement has come.
In order to make America great and glorious again, I am tonight announcing my candidacy for President of the United States. America's comeback starts right now.
A comeback to what exactly? The likes of what we saw on January 6th when people attempted to topple the U.S. government at Donald Trump's bidding, because that event and the associated images need to be mentioned and shown every single time this candidacy is brought up, just as NPR did with their tweet last night. Breaking. Donald Trump, who tried to overthrow the results of the 2020 presidential election and inspired a deadly riot at the Capitol in a desperate attempt to keep himself in power, has filed to run for president again in 2024. Every word is perfect and accurate, although I might have added a few details about his being twice impeached, saying his own vice president deserved to be hanged, that thing about there being fine people on both sides, and a few other related issues, but Musk still hasn't lifted Twitter's character limit. Thankfully, there are no such limits here. So for much more, I'm joined by Jennifer Horn. Jennifer is the former chair of the New Hampshire Republican Party, one of the co-founders of the Lincoln Project, political action committee formed by a group of prominent Republicans and former Republicans working to defeat Trumpism in the GOP, and Joe Malone, former Republican treasurer of Massachusetts. Joe and Jennifer, it's good to see you both. Thanks so much for being here. Jennifer, what did you think of the speech? Thanks. What did you think of the speech?
I thought it was surprisingly low energy. I thought that it was bizarre, dark. It didn't sound at all to me like somebody who saw what was great and, in his words, glorious about America. I think it was, everything about it was less than, underwhelming, fewer people. The whole thing was just bizarre. A ballroom at a Florida resort instead of a rally with 10,000 people. I mean, you go through a million little political setup details about it that were just wrong and dark and underwhelming.
So you've done a couple announcements yourself in your career, Joe Malone. What did you think of last night?
So more importantly than what I thought, people I'm talking to today, Republicans, they keep saying if he had conducted himself that way for the stretch that he was in the White House versus being so bombastic and so much in the attack mode, that he might have had a better chance of getting reelected.
What'd you say back to them?
And my response was, I think he's taking advice, at least temporarily, that his old approach wasn't working. Try something different.
Well, one approach from his old approach that was embraced last night in his new approach, to use your friend's line, is there was an endless succession of lies. I mean, not close lies, not opinions, not rhetoric, immense lying. Does that bother people, or do they just say, well, that's who Trump is, he lies, get over it?
I think Americans, regardless of their party, have gotten used to politicians stretching the truth, lying, and I think Biden is very much a part of that. And, do you
ever lie like Donald Trump did last night? I mean, the ocean is going to rise 1/8 of an inch in 200 to 300 years, when in fact, just as one example, the National Ocean Service says it's going to rise 10 to 12 inches in 30 years. That's a pretty big deal, no?
I mean, do you believe that Joe Biden knew nothing about Hunter Biden?
We don't do that what about stuff here. My question is, does that trouble you at all?
I think Washington politicians have gotten very used to lying, and Trump is not an exception.
Why do you think Trump is running, Joe Malone?
I think a lot of it is about his own will, and call it ego, call it anything, but I do think that when he's attacking DeSantis, when DeSantis has got 2 weeks to go to the election for governor of Florida, it shows you he sees it too much about Donald Trump as opposed to something bigger.
You know, my analysis, Jennifer, as to why he's running, and obviously I don't know, is when and if he's indicted by Merrick Garland or in Georgia, he will say, I was only indicted because I'm a candidate for president that they fear is going to win, and hope that people don't know the investigation's going on for years. Why do you think he made the decision?
Well, first, let me just respond to something very quickly that you guys were just talking about a second ago.
Sure.
It was lie upon lie upon lie. And Joe's right. The American people have sort of reached a point where they're just sort of like, oh, my God, these guys are all lying. But it's so bad. It's so dangerous. And Donald Trump doesn't lie about, I'm going to cut taxes 2%, and he doesn't try to cut them at all. This man inspired and fueled an insurrection against America. He inspired violence against his own vice president. People died in that attempted coup. Nobody should ever brush off Donald Trump's attempt at the presidency as, just like all the other guys. He's nothing like the other guys. He's extremely dangerous.
But forget the why question then. How do you respond to what Jennifer said? And how do you speak for your friends, too, your Republican friends? How do they and you respond to the insurrection?
So I would say this. I voted for Donald Trump twice. I have a real problem with January 6th in terms of his, not only that it was a black mark on America, black mark on his presidency, but it was also a case that he's damaged goods now. And when you see someone like DeSantis, who I think is going to be a fabulous candidate, why not go with him as opposed to someone who's going to make the job of winning the White House back for the Republicans much more difficult?
So you done with Trump?
You know what? I am. And I would go one step further to say, I think this president needs to be replaced and replaced quickly. I mean, he's a guy who doesn't have the cognitive skills.
Okay,
Biden.
we'll talk about Joe Biden next time.
So my point is, I want to see a Republican get elected.
Fine. Were you going to say something there, Jennifer, or no?
Yeah, look, I have a lot of respect for Joe, but this is exactly, he's right.
Wait, we're talking about Joe Biden or Joe Malone?
Joe Malone.
Okay, fine. I just want to be clear.
And Joe Biden.
Okay,
Let me tell you, and Joe Biden. But what Joe Malone is talking about is exactly right. The Republican Party is going to try to package this as Trump was great when we had him. Time to move on to DeSantis. Is DeSantis really the better guy, or is he just Donald Trump in a more refined package? Until the Republican Party completely rejects Trumpism and banishes the whole anti-democracy wing of the party, then it doesn't matter if it's Ron DeSantis or Donald Trump or anybody else or Kevin McCarthy or Mitch McConnell. It's the same position, the same danger that we are presented to as a nation.
Well, beyond the Trumpism, as you call it, of Ron DeSantis, there are other hugely popular governors at home. One of them was the governor of Florida, Jeb Bush, and on the national stage, not so much, and DeSantis hasn't done that yet. Jennifer, staying with you for a second, the only member of Congress who was there last night was Madison Cawthorn, who not only was defeated in his most recent election, but is also accused of essentially misappropriating hundreds of thousands of dollars. The New York Post, owned by Rupert Murdoch, used to be a big Trump supporter, very powerful guy in Republican circles, had a headline in the New York Post. You can see at the bottom, Florida man makes announcement on page 26. Do those things matter when you have a huge, even though he didn't have a huge personality last night, when you are a huge presence like Donald Trump is, does it matter if powerful media like Fox News, like the Post, like the Wall Street Journal abandon him? Does it matter if members of Congress jump away? Or at the end of the day, is it just all about Trump?
Well, for Trump, it's always all about Trump. If people have not read the New York Post announcement, they must. It is hysterical. It will be the bright light of your day. However, does it matter if the media abandons you? To some degree, I think it does. There's no question that in 2016, a lot of Trump's personality and all was built up by the free media that he got. And we saw that in 2020, he didn't get quite so much of that. But what's more important is what will Donald Trump do to keep his base, and what will the Republican Party leadership do to try to take his base away from him?
What will they do? What will they do? Is there any evidence that they'll do anything?
But as I say, so far, everyone's talking about how they're starting to kind of step away from Trump and they're trying to reprimand Trump and this sort of thing. There have been zero indications that the Republican Party or its leadership is ready to reject Trump internally. Trump raises money. Trump keeps their primary voters, riled up and ready to take action. Trump can attack and destroy any individual sitting Republican in Congress. As long as they're afraid to stand up to Trump publicly and aggressively, we're still going to have the party of Trump, whether he's president or not.
Are you troubled, Jim Malone? I read at the top the tweet that NPR put out last night. Now there's a big move on Twitter, hashtag defund NPR. Margaret Sullivan, a former ombudsman, media critic at the Washington Post and New York Times, has said the media gave a free ride to Donald Trump in 2016. I think they did. Not only places like CNN, which is my cable channel of choice, broadcast speeches from beginning to end. They'd have video, live video of the lectern that's empty, waiting for Donald Trump to come. Everything NPR said is true. Should that not be the way every time he speaks, he's reintroduced the American public?
In terms
insurrectionist, somebody who attempted to lead an overthrow, somebody who's been impeached twice.
So I guess that's the case, but
it is the case factually.
Should you be doing that with every politician? Should Ted Kennedy have been, Chappaquiddick, he left a woman there to drown? I don't know. As long as there's an even playing field, whether it's because once you start that precedent where it's, I don't like his ideology, so we're going to name.
It's not
all
about
the
ideology. It's a recitation of facts.
But it's a slippery slope.
How about it? Is it a slippery slope, Jennifer Warren?
Not at all. It's not at all a slippery slope. Nobody's saying introduce him as the guy who's been married 3 times, or the guy who was mean to his kid, or the guy who kicks puppies. They're saying this is the guy who inspired and fueled a violent, deadly attempt to overthrow the government of the United States. The only thing that compares to that in the United States, government history, is the start of the Civil War. I don't understand how anybody can look at what Donald Trump brought, the precipice to which he led our nation, and think that he's just like everybody else.
How about
if somebody
Let's let you respond to that if I can,
Jennifer. There's another candidate out there who's been twice impeached. They should be introduced that way too.
How about it?
So Jennifer, put Bob Smith's name as opposed to Donald Trump. Once the media gets into this selectivity of, we're going to say this person, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, did these things wrong, but we're not going to say it about this other person. Where does that come into play? I don't get it.
I don't think that should come into play. Everyone should be treated equally. If there are other people who led violent
one at a time, Jennifer, then
they
Joe.
should be identified.
But Jennifer, you're talking about the insurrection, quote unquote, as if that has been signed, sealed, delivered. It was an ugly moment. We don't even know what Trump's role was in the whole thing.
Wait, you don't. What do you think Trump's role was in the whole thing? You saw what he had to say. You watched the January 6th hearings.
I'm not privy to all of the information that's come out. You have Republicans who are saying, why wouldn't they let the minority leader, why wouldn't they let McCarthy put his 2 people on there? Instead, the speaker said, no, I'm going to choose the 2 people.
John Malone, Steve Scalise, who's one of the ranking Republicans, has said publicly Nancy Pelosi did absolutely nothing. And then we see a video where Nancy Pelosi is on the phone to the governor of Virginia, the vice president of the United States. And you know who's standing right next to her while she's having those phone conversations? Steve Scalise, who said she did nothing.
But my point is that she put Kinzinger on there, and she put Liz Cheney,
we call her, yeah.
Thank you very much. She put those 2 on there because she knew where they were coming from, and they hated Trump.
Kevin McCarthy was offered seats on the January 6th.
My only point, Jim, and you don't like hearing this, but if you're going to list all of these things about Trump or anybody else, you better be willing to say Joe Biden,
what other president
ABC,
has attempted to lead an insurrection to overthrow a democratic election?
One other president has had a son who's taken millions of dollars from China.
What about
I don't know. You know
what troubles me most, Jennifer, about the Trump conversation, and you've been relentless. A lot of your colleagues have too. To me, the issue and most troubling is not Trump. The issue is that there's still tens of millions of Americans who are fine with a guy, in fact, in love with a guy who traded in racism, misogyny, insurrectionism. I would argue is responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people, because to him, the COVID crisis was a PR crisis, not a public health crisis. How do you explain the lingering attachment that is really deep with so many people in the Republican Party in this country?
I can't explain it for every one of the millions and millions of Americans out there who still embrace what they think or who they think Donald Trump is. But when it comes, one of the biggest problems with that is that all of those tens of millions of people have credibly elected members of the Senate and the House who embrace what they're saying, who are election deniers, who would vote for Trump again if he becomes the nominee of the party. It's not because I left the party, but because it is their responsibility. It falls on Republican Party leadership to fix this problem.
You have 30-second response, Jim Malone.
Jennifer, all I'm saying, this is not a defense of Trump. It is a level playing field that has to exist. And when you have an administration who's saying the border is sealed and the media doesn't say, wait a minute, we got all these people coming over the border isn't sealed.
I have a compromise. How about that?
Lie.
So like Mike Pence, when we talk about him, we should say the guy who Donald Trump thought should be hanged on January 6th.
Yeah,
is that good?
Again, Jim, I understand. It's indefensible.
Jim Malone, appreciate it. Jennifer Horn, as always, got to go. Thank you both
Always
so
good.
much. Last week's summer weather streak was pretty nice if you could manage to put the impending doom of climate change aside. But these days, the more seasonally appropriate misery and rain might have you dreaming of an escape. And based on these photos, there's a part of Greece, look at that, that's jumping to the top of my to-travel list. Joining me is the man who took those and has plenty more vacation experiences to share, including where to find the most Christmassy town in America. I'd call it lovingly hell on earth. And what type of traveler not to be. That, of course, would be, I don't mean not to be him, that would be globe travel writer Christopher Mueller. I didn't get that quite right, but hi, Christopher, nice to see you.
Hi, good to see you, Mr. Grinch.
Now, one of my dreams in life, and this is totally true, was to do an overnight train thing through a beautiful part of the country.
Yep.
Go to the dining car, have dinner at a white, white tablecloth kind of thing. You've destroyed those dreams. Now, there are two trips you took. One was New York to Savannah, the Silver Meteor. Tell us about that, leaving out any reference to fecal matter, which you have in your story.
Technically, it's fecal mist.
Excuse me, thank you.
I can explain that process for you.
So how horrible was that New York to Savannah?
It was so bad I couldn't bring myself to write about it, which for me is really saying something. It was just miserable.
You had a roommate, I think it's called, that you likened to a prison cell. Is that not correct?
It really was a prison cell because there was a stainless steel toilet right beside the seat that folded down into a bed. So all I could think about was the years of people using the toilet right beside the bed because the cabin hadn't been renovated in probably, I'm being generous, 30 years.
Wow. So did you, because I mean this sincerely, you're a responsible journalist, rather than trashing Amtrak, you said, let's give it another go, which is why you did the Seattle-Chicago thing?
That's exactly it, because I thought this one experience, although hellish, it can't be like this every other. I mean, the employees were kind of complaining about what a lousy company they were working for. It was just like, you know, they don't know who I am, obviously, but no customer wants to hear that. So between the prison cell, the service, they had just gotten rid of the white tablecloths and the dining car. And this was pre-pandemic, so there was no reason. And they were handing out foil tins of food.
This is post-pandemic. Post-pandemic.
Pre.
Wait, your trip was pre?
The Silver Meteor was
that was
pre.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And then the Empire Builder, which was the one that was the second chance, which I did last month, was the post.
And that was not so hot either.
Correct.
What you basically said is the scenery is beautiful and the train's a great place to see it from, but you weren't so crazy about the train out there either, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was more into that ride than I was the previous one because I didn't have a toilet in my room, so that helped. I booked another roomette, which is the smaller version.
What, did you just lean out the window, or what did you do? Obviously,
when the train was moving.
Exactly. Thank you.
No,
Sorry, I said that. Go ahead.
I was trying to spread the fecal mist a little more easily.
Let's keep it going here. Yeah. So, but I am right. I mean, what was the view? What did you get to see that was fabulous?
It went through Glacier National Park in Montana, and an observation car at sunrise. And there's these trees called larch trees, which are sort of pine trees that aren't evergreen, and they're turning bright yellow with the snow-capped mountains. It was fantastic. Yeah.
Okay, so when most people say they spent time at Leavenworth, they mean hard time, like in a prison in Leavenworth, Kansas.
Right, like you did, yeah.
You spent time in Leavenworth, Washington. I guess I was on the way to Seattle, which I'd never heard of before. And it is, what is it, the most Christmassy? Was that your terminology?
Yeah, it was
town in America?
There was a survey that was done, and it was voted the most Christmassy town in America.
And why is it? What happened? What is it?
Well, it's sort of like it's actually just like being in a Bavarian village. And, normally you would think, oh, it's hokey, you'll be able to tell. But these people are committed to making it like a Bavarian village. Even the street signs are in that font that you see
I know exactly,
everywhere. And it's just, there's a nutcracker museum, there's a reindeer farm. I mean, there's 21 miles of Christmas lights at the holidays. You can't get a more Christmassy town.
I love Christmas.
It
sounds like one of the worst things I've ever heard. Is it as bad as it sounds or no?
Well, I mean, it depends. You know, for instance, you would go and you would have a bad attitude.
Exactly.
And you would not like it. I normally would be a cynical guy with something like this, but I just thought, you know what? I'm here. I'm going to live it.
And so, like, are all the is it 2,400 people? Is that what you wrote?
Yeah, it's a really tiny town.
Are all the town residents into the shtick, or are they? Or?
I mean, weirdly, everyone I spoke with is into it. I don't know if they just happen to be nice there, but I spent an inordinate amount of time at the gingerbread factory.
Oh, my goodness.
And everyone there was more than happy to talk Christmas. And there was a giant ornament store, obviously, called Kris Kringle, no E.
Of course.
And everyone there was like in the Christmas spirit, and I was there in October.
Okay, so you wrote another piece, the title of which, I know you don't write the titles, but the title actually accurately reflects this: Everything I Need to Know About Travel I Learned from James Bond. Now, for people who think that's sort of just pure rhetoric, we have some proof that everything he did learn about travel was from James Bond. When Christopher joined us as James Bond from the Mediterranean Sea in July of 2021, here he is.
Hang on a second.
That's hopeless.
So
that was one of my favorite moments. That was only 4 seconds there, but you were on the Mediterranean in a tux, slightly tipsy, drinking wine, a la James Bond, correct?
Yes, and I was with 2 women called Bambi and Thumper. So it was just like James Bond.
So
just like.
So what did you when it said this everything I learned so and so? Give me run down the list quickly. What are some of the things you did learn? Because actually some of them were I wouldn't say serious, but legit. Like, what'd you learn?
No, I mean, the thing about going off the beaten path, I think, is a big one, where James Bond does that a lot. You know, he'll go to the big tourist sites, but then he'll sort of find the quiet places where he's usually recuperating from bullet wounds, which I don't recommend getting shot.
I understand that.
Traveling by yourself. You know, no one is better at traveling by himself and making new friends like Bambi and Thumper, like James Bond. And I think people should not be afraid to travel by themselves when they're out.
By the way, we've talked. By the way, you don't have to mention Bambi and Thumper again. Twice was plenty, just so you know.
Yeah.
Thank you. So you're a big solo traveler, not a traveler. And you often write your husband is upset because you're not home more often or you're not home more quickly, and that's sweet
Or
sort of
so
throwaway.
he says, yes.
Apparently, I was going to say I've spoken. But traveling solo is a special deal. I've told you before, I'm a little intimidated, particularly in places where the language is different. I know it's childish, but you break through all this stuff. How?
I mean, honestly, it's not childish. It's just something that we're conditioned to. We've always vacationed with our family or our spouses. When you're by yourself, you find that people approach you because, one, they feel sorry for you. So, you know, not Bambi and Thumper, but their friend Plenty O'Toole will come over and chat me up. No, but seriously, like when I was on the train, I would meet people. When I go on cruise ships, that's a big one. I always end up with surrogate families. It's crazy. So I find that even though I'm traveling by myself, I'm seldom by myself.
I admire the quality, I really do, and I hope someday I have it. So you wrote a piece about social media and travel that is maybe the most pathetic thing I've read about social media since Elon Musk took over Twitter.
Ooh, boy, that's bad.
Can you talk about, people who apparently care more about the response they get, likes and comments about their trip, than the trip itself? That's essentially what they say.
That's it, yeah. There's like, 40% of people, like millennials and Gen Z. It's like 25% of everybody else, which is also shocking. But yeah, it's what their memory of the trip is how many people liked or commented on their photos. So for instance, if they posted something, it had only got like 5 likes. They'll come away thinking this was not a successful vacation.
Even if they loved the vacation when they were there.
Yeah, I mean, that was what this survey found. And, you know, it's one survey, but I have plenty of friends who do this. They're guilty of overposting. You know, I'll just come up with a fake name, Eric Kent, who does this quite a bit. And
Two friends of mine, since you said a name, Bambi and Thumper. They do. They
I know
post it
those
all the
two,
time.
yeah.
They do. It's incredible. But you have great advice, by the way, buried in this column about these pathetic losers who care more about comments than the actual thing. You say never post photographs until you're home, because if you post them while you're traveling, you're going to check to see the likes and comments, and it's going to spoil your vacation. Is that?
Yeah, I always feel like it's better to try to be in the moment more than just posting on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok, And then one of the other things that I said years ago in another column was that for security purposes, I mean, when you're posting to social media, you're basically saying to everybody, look, I'm not home.
Break into my house.
Yeah.
That's a very good point, by the way. One last thing. Let's end on a bright note. The Peloponnesians, is that how you say that part of Greece?
Yes, and I love that every time we've talked about
I ask you the same thing.
Yes.
Well, because I'm nervous I'm going to mispronounce it, but Peloponnesians, that's part of Greece. And it's the less traveled part of Greece. Am I not right?
No, you're completely right.
And so what stood out that made you love it as much as you apparently did? What was the big deal?
I've been to Greece a bunch of times, mostly the islands, which is where everyone goes.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the opposite of Mykonos and those places because it was quiet.
You took all these pictures, right?
I did, yeah.
They're beautiful, actually. They're really
that was
beautiful.
Olympia. That was just up there, which is, where the Olympic Games took place.
That's why it's called Olympia, by the way. Yeah.
Smart.
Thank you. And so what does it have to recommend it? Is because it's less traveled? Is that part of the appeal or what?
I think it's a combination of things. Definitely because it's less traveled, but also it has incredible historic sites. It has mountains. It has beaches. It has some of the best preserved Byzantine cities in Europe. It's completely overlooked. When I went there to a health retreat escape, and everyone there was Australian or British or just from everywhere but the United States. So people, I feel like, don't know about it, and I felt guilty writing about it because
people will know about it.
People will know about it, but thankfully no one reads what I write or follows my advice.
I actually read it. And by the way, before you go, for people who need like a used computer, when will you be traveling next? Exactly. Chris
Yes.
from Uther, love to see you. Thank you so much.
Great as
Brilliant
always.
travel writer, Boston Globe. That's it for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget Ukraine.